The Watcher True Story versus The Watcher Netflix show. With the recent release of The Watcher on Netflix and it being based on a true story about individuals receiving letters to a house that they'd moved into from somebody claiming to be the Watcher, I thought I'd take a look at the real case and see how accurate the show was and determine how much was fact and fiction. So let's get into it. Here is The Watcher True Story versus The Watcher Netflix show. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Are the Brannock family real? The short answer to that is no. The Brannock family are not real, but instead the show was based off of the real family that moved into the house in 2014, who were named Maria and Derek Broaddus. They had 3 children, not 2 like we saw in the Netflix show, and they themselves didn't have much involvement in the Netflix show being created. However, they did ask that the main characters not be named after them and for the actors to not resemble how they look in real life. So the Brannock family were fictional characters based off of the Broaddus family. Were the Neighbours real? In the Netflix show we had the Neighbours that played a large role in the mystery of the identity of the Watcher, such as Pearl, Jasper, John, Mitch and Mo. These neighbours who were considered suspects by Dean were not real either. There was one family in the true version of events that I believe Pearl and Jasper were loosely based on, and this was the Langford family. They had apparently lived in the neighbourhood since the 60s. The mother was a 90-year-old woman, and her son Michael Langford was an individual who would be seen going into people's yards and looking through their windows. Similarly to what we saw Jasper doing in the Netflix show, Michael Langford was considered a suspect in the real-life case for a brief moment, but he was ruled out due to the lack of evidence. And as well, many people said that he'd likely be unable to construct a letter like the ones that the family were receiving. The letters that were received. The letters that we saw in the show being read were extremely similar to the ones that were actually sent in real life in terms of the language that was being spoken and the specific details that the Watcher would go into. The show used real lines from the letter, such as "Do you need to fill the house with young blood?" Another focusing on the children going down to the basement or if they were frightened, along with hinting at the ambiguity of the identity of who the Watcher was. The person driving by, walking by, looking up. It could be any of them. So the show did stay true in adopting the tone of the letters and also the specifics that were included, as they were extremely similar. The specific details about the Broaddus family names, what they were up to in the house, and the clear understanding that somebody was watching them led the family to prevent their children from going to the house for their own safety. Was Andrew or any of the previous owners real? The answer to that would be no. Andrew, the person that was deemed to be crazy in the Netflix show, wasn't real and didn't live in the house prior to the Broaddus family. Instead, the previous owners were a couple called John and Andrea Woods, and they lived in the house for a little over 20 years and never experienced anything like that, other than one letter shortly before they moved out, but they thought nothing of the letter and threw it away. John and Andrea didn't disclose any of the information of this letter when they were selling the house, so Derek and Maria were none the wiser and weren't aware of this when they were purchasing it. This ultimately led Derek and Maria to sue John and Andrea a little while down the line. There was a theory, like we saw in the show, that the person sending the letters could well have been an individual who put an offer in on the house but didn't get it accepted, which would have shown a motive for the letters, as it would be down to jealousy. Did it impact the homeowners? In the show, we saw Dean and Nora have a real knock on their mental state due to the paranoia and fear for their own life and their family's life following the letters. In the real-life case, we saw the same thing happen to Derek and Maria. Derek was said to have been suffering from depression, and Maria's mental state was also not in the best position. In the show, we saw Dean send out letters to the neighbours in order to spook them slightly, and this was something that did also happen in the real case, and he eventually went on to admit that it was him that sent them, but that was the only time that he wrote any of the letters. Were the homeowners considered suspects? Dean and Nora at one point were considered suspects, more so Dean than Nora, and this was included in the show because it was something that ran true with the real-life case. Unlike in the show, the house didn't cost over $3 million. It instead cost $1.3 million, and the theory was said that the family was said to be struggling financially following the purchase, like we saw in the Netflix show. So there was a theory out there that was focused around Derek and Maria potentially being in over their head in the purchasing of the house, and that they wanted to strike up a way to be able to get out of the situation that they were in. But this was something that was ruled out quite quickly, unlike in the Netflix show where it was left open-ended and made it seem like Dean could well have been behind the letters. What happened to the house? In the Netflix show, we saw that Karen moved into the house, but she started experiencing strange occurrences, so she quickly sold it, and it then went to a new family. This is slightly different to what occurred in real life. The Broaddus family never properly moved into the house due to all of the trouble that was being caused, and they had the house for around 5 years. They acquired it in 2014. They tried to sell it shortly after, but due to the letters, they couldn't get anybody to buy it. In 2016, they found a family to rent the house out to, and due to the letters, they implemented something in their contract that would allow them to leave if they received a letter, to which one did arrive shortly after, but they decided to stay. Then in 2019, the Broaddus family managed to sell the house at a lower price where a family decided to move in. Was Theodora real? Whilst Theodora herself was not real, Derek did hire a private investigator like Dean did in order to find out some more information about who could have been sending the letters and posing as the Watcher. Were there other suspects? In the show, everybody was a suspect, and there were some similar things that occurred that were true. We saw that Dakota had an online gamer tag as the name of the Watcher. Whilst Dakota's arc isn't entirely true, there was an individual who drew the authorities' attention when it was revealed that he lived near the area and his apparent online persona was called the Watcher. However, it didn't go any further. It was also true in the sense that the DNA sample that was found on the envelope was found to be that of a woman, so that was something that was also true in the telling of the show. I feel the Netflix show did a good job at loosely basing it off of the family that bought the house and incorporating many of the facts of the case that did occur. One big thing was that the family didn't live there like we saw in the show, but for the purpose of dramatization, it made it more impactful that they did. There are strong elements of truth behind the 7-episode show, followed by dramatization, and I feel the ending does a good job at making you realize how open-ended the case actually is, and that they're no closer to finding out who the Watcher is today when compared to all of those years ago. I'd recommend giving this show a watch, as it is surprising the ordeal that the family who acquired the house had to go through. So, there you have it, The Watcher True Story versus The Watcher Netflix show. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of the show? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.